He had everything a man could want, except the one thing he couldn't forget. David Walker moved through the airport like a man on schedule. Suit sharp, shoes polished, phone buzzing, and then he froze. A woman ahead, slim, still, holding a child. It couldn't be. But it was. Elena, she hadn't changed, but the boy in her arms? His eyes, brown, steady, exactly like David's. The world around him faded. Only that gaze remained. "Elena!" he called out. She turned, just slightly. Her face stiffened. Then she clutched the child close and hurried away. David pushed through the crowd, eyes scanning, heart racing. Too late. Gone, just like 6 years ago, but this time she took something more than silence. She took a child that looked exactly like him. David sat alone in his apartment. Lights off, jacket still on. Hours passed. He hadn't moved. Her face wouldn't leave his mind. Neither would the child's. 6 years. No contact, no message. Just silence. And now, she's back, holding a boy with his eyes. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands locked, breathing slow, heavy. He thought she'd disappeared forever, vanished without a trace. He convinced himself she didn't love him enough to stay, but today shattered that lie. He still remembered the way she laughed, how she'd steal glances when she thought he wasn't looking, how she held his hand like it was her only anchor. She was the only woman he ever let all the way in, and she left him without a word. Now she's back with more than a memory. They didn't have much back then. A small apartment, a second-hand couch, takeout boxes on the floor, but it was enough. Elena curled beside him, her head on his shoulder. Rain tapped gently against the window. They were wrapped in one blanket, sharing the one world. She laughed at something silly he said. The sound, it used to make him forget everything else. David looked at her like she was all he'd ever need. He took her hand, kissed her knuckles. "No matter what happens," he whispered, "I won't let go of you, ever." She smiled, eyes shining, like she believed him, and for a while he believed it too. Then the memory faded. Back in the present, that promise echoed in his mind, cold, distant, broken. "She's a nurse, David. That's all she'll ever be." His mother's voice was sharp, cold. Margaret Walker didn't raise her voice, but every word cut deep. David stood in the family dining room. Elena wasn't there. She was never invited. "You're a Walker," Margaret said. "She doesn't belong in this world, and you know it." He didn't respond, just clenched his jaw. He wanted to protect Elena, but he also didn't want to lose his mother. That silence. It started to grow between them. Late dinners became quiet. Her smile faded. He picked up more work, said less, felt more she never asked him to choose, but he could feel the question hanging in every glance she gave, and slowly the warmth between them began to dim. "You never defend me," Elena said, voice shaking. David stood near the window, arms crossed, avoiding her eyes. "I don't want to fight," he muttered. "That's the problem. You never fight. Not for me, not for us." She stepped closer, her hands clenched, her voice cracked. "I sit there, silent at dinners I'm not invited to. I smile at people who look through me. And you say nothing." His jaw tightened. "It's complicated." "No, David, it's simple. You choose them every time." He turned to speak, but she cut him off. Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't need a rich man. I don't need a perfect one. I need someone who doesn't disappear when it gets hard." She paused, voice low, final. "I don't need a weak man." Silence. He didn't move, and she walked out the door. The rain was heavy that night. David came home late. Work. Always work. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. No music, no warmth, just stillness. He called her name once. Nothing. Then he saw the note. Except there was no note. Only a pair of earrings, the ones he gave her on her birthday, laid gently on the kitchen table. No bag, no clothes, no trace of her. She was gone. No fight, no explanation. Just absence. He stood in the middle of the room, soaked from the rain, holding the earrings in his hand. His phone stayed silent. For days, then weeks, then years. And now, 6 years later, he sees her again, not alone. David couldn't sleep. The airport moment replayed again and again, her eyes, the child's face. He needed answers. A few calls, some emails, old contacts, quiet favors. One name came back, Elena Brooks, still using her maiden name. A hospital in a small town, 3 hours out. Night shift nurse, low profile, no online trail, no social media, no photos. Like she'd erased herself from the world. Why here? Why now? Why keep the child hidden? David stared at the hospital's staff page. A blurry ID photo. Still her, a little older, still familiar. She looked tired. He leaned back in his chair. So many questions, no answers. But one thing was clear. She didn't disappear. She just started over, without him. The apartment was small, faded wallpaper, one window, thin walls. Elena moved quietly, folding laundry on a worn-out couch. She looked exhausted, like sleep was something she used to know. In the corner, Mason sat on the floor, legs crossed. He was focused, tongue slightly out, coloring something carefully. "Elena!" he called, not looking up. "Do you think my dad is strong?" She froze for a second, then smiled softly. "I think he must be." Mason held up his drawing. Stick figures, a woman, a little Bibu, and a tall man in a red cape. On top, in crooked letters, "Dad is my superhero." Elena looked away, eyes wet. She had no words, just silence, and the weight of a secret too big for a child to carry. David stood at the door, breathing steady. He knocked once, then again. The door creaked open, just enough. Elena's face appeared, tired, guarded. Then she saw him. Her eyes widened. She slammed the door shut without a word. "Elena, wait!" he called out. From behind the door, her voice was sharp. "I don't need you. We're fine without you." A long pause, then his voice, lower, slower. "That boy, is he mine?" Silence. No yelling, no denial, only the sound of her breath through the wood. She didn't say yes, she didn't say no. That silence said everything, and nothing. David took a step back. Something in his chest shifted, heavy, unsettled. He wasn't ready for the truth, but now he couldn't walk away from it. David stood in the kitchen, fists clenched at his sides. "She's back," he said. His mother, Margaret, didn't look up from her tea. "With a child," he added. "A boy who looks exactly like me." Still no reaction. Just a slow sip, then a sigh. "I told you, David, that girl was never right for you." He stepped closer. "Did you know where she went?" Margaret looked at him now, calm, cold. "She left because she wanted to." "That's not true." She paused, voice flat. "Well, maybe she had help. A little money goes a long way." David blinked. "You paid her?" Margaret shrugged. "She took it. That's all that matters." His heart dropped. Was that why Elena disappeared? Everything twisted. Nothing felt solid anymore. David couldn't shake the doubt, so he called an old friend, a private investigator. 2 days later, a file landed in his inbox. Photos? Documents? One short video clip, grainy, filmed from across the street. Elena, 6 years younger, standing by a black car. The window rolled down. A hand reached out. Cash. She took it, folded it quickly, looked around, then walked away. David watched the clip again, and again. No sound, no context, just that one moment. His chest tightened. Had she taken the money and run? Was it all a lie? The woman he loved? The child she never told him about? Everything felt crooked. Nothing added up. He wanted to believe in her, but now even he wasn't sure what was real. A memory. Rain again. Elena sat in the back seat of a dark car. Her hand shook. Across from her, Margaret Walker stared coldly. "You think love is enough?" Margaret said, slipping an envelope onto the seat. "You walk away now, or I'll make sure that child never sees daylight." Elena's breath caught. She touched her stomach, barely showing. "You wouldn't—" "I always protect my family," Margaret interrupted. "Do the same. Take it and leave." Tears welled in Elena's eyes, not for herself, for what she was already carrying. She opened the door, stepped into the rain. The money stayed in her coat pocket. Unopened. Back in the present, David still doesn't know, and she never planned to tell, not yet. David stood just outside the playground fence, hands in his pockets, eyes locked on one boy. Mason ran in circles with a red cape tied around his neck, cardboard on his wrists, a paper mask, pure joy. No fear, no past, just now. A ball rolled near David's feet. Mason chased it, stopped it in front of him. The boy looked up, studying his face. "You look like my superhero," he said. "My dad." David froze, then knelt down, slowly handing him the ball. "What's your dad like?" he asked, voice tight. Mason smiled wide. "He's strong, brave. He just hasn't come home yet." David nodded, holding the ball a little longer than he needed to. He smiled, but his eyes filled. That was his son, and he didn't even know his name until now. "Elena!" She rushed across the playground, voice sharp. Mason looked up, confused. David stood slowly, hands raised. "I wasn't trying to—" "You don't get to try," she snapped. "You don't get to show up out of nowhere and talk to my son." David's face tightened. Our son! Her eyes flared. You lost the right to say that a long time ago. Parents nearby turned to look. Mason stood frozen, cape dragging behind him. He's just a boy, David said quietly. He deserves to know. He knows what he needs to, Elena shot back, and what he doesn't need is another man who leaves. The words hit harder than she expected. Her voice cracked just slightly. David didn't speak. Mason tugged at her hand. She turned, pulling him away. David stayed behind, watching them go. Again. The apartment was quiet. Only the soft clink of glass as David poured another drink. He sat alone in the dark, bottle half empty on the table. The echo of Elena's words still burned in his head. She doesn't need another man who leaves. He stared at the wall, then whispered into the stillness, I should have held on to you. His voice cracked. He stood slowly, walked to the cabinet in the corner, opened the small wooden drawer. There they were. The earrings. Simple. Silver. Still exactly where she left them. He held one between his fingers, like it might say something back, but it didn't. Nothing had for years. And now, maybe it was too late to fix what he let break. Margaret placed her teacup down, slow and deliberate. I saw her at the park, David said, voice steady. With the boy. Margaret didn't flinch. She doesn't belong in this family, David. That kind of woman, she doesn't step foot in this house. He stayed quiet for a moment, then stood up. Don't say that again. Her brow lifted, surprised. I let you run everything, for years. My choices, my life, her. He stepped closer. But you don't get to decide anymore. Margaret's voice dropped. I only wanted the best for you. No, he said, firm now. You wanted control, and I gave it to you. I'm done with that. She stared at him. For the first time, she looked smaller. And he finally looked like a man standing for something. The envelope sat unopened on the counter. Elena stared at it for the third time that morning. No return address, just her name, written in familiar handwriting. Inside, an invitation, simple words, a quiet place, neutral ground. David wanted to talk. She folded it back slowly. Did she dare open that door again? Mason tugged at her sleeve, breaking her thoughts. Mom? She looked down. Yeah, baby? He pointed to a drawing on the wall. A family, just two figures. Who's my dad? Her breath caught. She wasn't ready for that question. Not today. Not ever. She crouched down, hugged him tight. Her voice wouldn't come out. And then, for the first time in years, she cried. Not from fear, but from the weight of everything she had to keep hidden. Elena packed quickly. Just the essentials. A few clothes, papers, Mason's drawings folded neatly in her bag. She didn't leave a note. She just couldn't do this anymore. Where are we going? Mason asked, yawning. Somewhere safe, she said, buckling his seatbelt. The sky was gray, roads slick from early rain. She drove in silence, jaw tight, eyes focused ahead. Then headlights, a horn, screeching tires, impact. The car spun once, twice, then stopped, silence. Then Mason's voice, faint and trembling. Mom! She turned, blood on his forehead, his eyes fluttering. Her scream tore through the stillness. David's phone rang once, then again, urgent, unknown number. Elena Sister's accident is so your son. He didn't ask questions. He just ran. Suit jacket left on the chair. Phone forgotten. Car keys, door, street, highway. Every red light felt like a curse. Every second, a lifetime. He reached the hospital, heart pounding through his chest. Inside, chaos. Voices, stretchers, beeping monitors. Then he saw them, nurses wheeling Mason through the hallway. Tiny body, blood-stained shirt. Without thinking, David rushed forward. Let me, please, he's my son. They let him through. He lifted Mason into his arms, voice shaking. It's okay, buddy, I've got you. The doors to the ER swung open. David ran, his son in his arms, hope slipping with every step. Elena rushed through the hospital doors, breath sharp, steps uneven. Where is he? She shouted. My son, Mason Brooks! A nurse pointed down the hall. She ran. Then she saw them. David sitting on a bench, motionless, Mason in his arms. Wrapped in blankets, face pale, eyes closed. David looked up. Tears streaked his face, but he didn't speak. Elena froze. Then broke. She dropped to her knees beside them, sobbing hard, shoulders shaking. He's your son, she whispered. Voice cracked, barely there. I didn't want it like this, but he's yours. David closed his eyes. The words landed like a storm. Not a guess. Not a question. The truth. Final, real, undeniable. He held Mason tighter. Elena rested her forehead against their son's hand, whispering the words again, this time through tears. David didn't speak for a long time. Just stared at the floor, breath shallow, then quietly. 6 years? And you never told me. His voice wasn't angry, just broken, like something hollowed out from inside. Elena sat beside him, hands folded tight. She couldn't meet his eyes. I wanted to, she said, but I couldn't be sure. He looked at her, hurt sharp in his gaze. Sure of what? That you'd choose us, she said. That you'd fight for him, not against him. David swallowed hard. Her words were calm, but each one landed like a blow. I was scared, she added. Not just of your mother, of you. Standing there and doing nothing. Silence. David turned back toward Mason. I wouldn't have let that happen. But deep down he wasn't sure anymore. Margaret arrived at the hospital, heels clicking, face tight. She saw Elena down the hall and didn't slow her pace. Her voice cut through the quiet. You've caused enough trouble. Take your mess and leave. David stepped between them, firm, unshaken. Stop. Margaret stared him down. You're really doing this? She's the mother of my son, he said. You will not speak to her like that. She trapped you, David. He took one step closer. And if you say one more word like that, you'll never see your grandson. Margaret froze. He'd never said anything like that before. David didn't flinch. Not this time. You told me she didn't belong. Turns out, she's the only one who ever did. Margaret looked away, her silence louder than any reply. Elena stood by the hospital window, arms crossed, shoulders trembling. David stepped beside her. Neither of them spoke. Then she whispered, eyes fixed outside, I used to think no one would ever stand up for me. Her voice cracked at the end. She wiped her cheek, but the tears kept coming. I wasn't strong enough to fight back, she added. Not alone. David turned to her. His voice was steady. You're not alone anymore. She looked at him, unsure. He held her gaze. From now on, I'm that person. I should have been all along. Something in her face softened. Like a wall finally gave in. She didn't respond with words, just nodded slowly. Like maybe, this time, she believed him. The room was quiet. Monitors beeped steady, breath soft, stillness deep. David and Elena sat on either side of Mason's hospital bed, each holding one small hand. Hours had passed. Then, Mason stirred. Elena leaned in, voice trembling. Sweetheart? The boy blinked slowly, eyes adjusting. He looked at David. Then barely above a whisper, Son, Dad? David froze, his lips parted, but no sound came. Then Mason reached for him. Dad. David bent forward, wrapping his arms around his son. Elena joined them, arms around them both. No words, just breath. Tears spilled freely, not from fear, not from pain, but from something deeper, something finally whole. 1 year later, a small house on the edge of town, wooden fence, vegetable garden, a golden retriever asleep on the porch. Inside, David stood at the kitchen counter, icing a cake. Not perfect, a little crooked, but he made it himself. Mason ran through the living room with a paper crown on his head. Elena followed, laughing, holding balloons. Hey, birthday boy, David called. You ready to blow out candles? Mason jumped into his arms. Best birthday ever! David smiled, pulling him close. It was the first party he'd ever thrown, and the first time he truly felt like a father. The house wasn't big, the gifts weren't expensive, but everything inside was real, and that was enough. The morning sun was soft. David held Mason's backpack in one hand, Elena's fingers in the other. They walked slowly down the sidewalk toward the school gate. Mason skipped ahead, cape flapping behind him, still his favorite thing. Neighbors waved as they passed. One smiled and called out, Now that's a happy family. David nodded, a quiet grin on his face. Elena squeezed his hand. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. There were no headlines, no cameras, no legacy to protect. Just one man, one woman, and the boy that brought them back together. They watched Mason run through the school doors. He turned and waved. Love you. David raised his hand, heart full. For the first time in years, everything felt calm. David sat at the edge of Mason's bed, the room lit only by a nightlight. The boy curled under the blanket, eyes wide, waiting for a story. David spoke softly. Once there was a man who almost lost his son because he was too proud, too slow to see what mattered. Mason tilted his head. What happened? He got lucky, David said. He realized in time, but it was close, too close. Mason reached for his hand. It's okay, Dad. You didn't lose me. David smiled, blinking away a tear. I almost did. Mason squeezed his hand tighter. You're my hero. David leaned down, kissed his forehead. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure I deserve that. They stood in the backyard, just the two of them. The sun was low, the air quiet. David held something small in his hand. Not flashy, just simple gold. Elena looked at him, surprised. David? He took a breath. This isn't about fixing the past, or making up for mistakes. He paused, eyes steady. It's because now I finally understand. Family isn't what you protect after everything else. It's what you protect instead of everything else. She didn't speak, just listened. He stepped closer. I don't want perfect. I want us. You, me, Mason. That's the life I'd give everything for. He opened the box. Marry me, Elena? Her eyes filled, and for once she didn't doubt his words. The kitchen table was scattered with crayons, markers, and paper. Mason sat quietly, tongue out, focused. He filled in the last bit of blue sky, then smiled to himself. Done, he said, holding it up. David walked over. What did you draw, buddy? Mason turned the paper around. 3 stick figures stood in a row, holding hands. One tall, one medium, one small, smiling together. Above them, in big letters, My dad came back. David took a slow breath. His throat tightened. Elena looked over, hand resting gently on his back. No words were needed. The boy had drawn what none of them could ever fully explain. A family lost once, now found. David sat alone in the quiet, holding Mason's drawing in his lap. Then slowly he looked up, into the camera. Straight ahead, honest, bare. His voice was calm, steady. If you still have time to... say the words. A pause. Don't wait. Don't assume they know, because sometimes silence is what breaks a family. He held the drawing up for a moment, the 3 stick figures still smiling. I thought I had forever. Turns out I barely made it back. He placed the paper down gently. Say it first. Say it even if it's hard, before it's too late. His eyes didn't move, just one quiet breath, fade.